This evening, I came here to speak to you about Vietnam. I do not have to tell you that our people are profoundly concerned about that struggle. There are passionate convictions about the wisest course for our nation to follow. There are many sincere and patriotic Americans who harbor doubts about sustaining the commitment that 3 presidents and 500,000 of our young men have made. Doubt and debate are enlarged because the problems of Vietnam are quite complex. They are a mixture of political turmoil, of poverty, of religious and factional strife, of ancient servitude, and modern longing for freedom. Vietnam is all of these things. Vietnam is also the scene of a powerful aggression that is spurred by an appetite for conquest. It is the arena where communist expansionism is most aggressively at work in the world today, where it is crossing international frontiers in violation of international agreements, where it is killing and kidnapping, where it is ruthlessly attempting to bend free people to its will. And into this mixture of subversion and war, of terror and hope, America has entered with its material power and with its moral commitment. The United States is therefore prepared, as the President determines, to take all necessary steps, including the use of armed forces, to assist any member or protocol state of the Southeast Asia Collective Treaty requesting assistance in defense of freedom.
My name is Charles Allen Larson. I was born the 3rd of March, 1945 in Fort Worth, Texas. Well, I grew up in a family of 5. I had a father and a mother, obviously, and 2 sisters that are younger than I am. My one sister was born in 1949, and the other one was born in 1953, so we were all 4 years apart. And I grew up in a rural area just north of Cherry Valley, Illinois. We moved from Texas because my dad was in the Air Force during World War II, and he was stationed in Texas, and he met my mother there, and then we moved back to where his parents had a farm just north of Cherry Valley, and I lived there from the time that I was about 2 years of age until I left to go to college, and then I got drafted and went into the service, and then came back and got married, but I did come back to Rockford. I had a good high school experience. I know some people don't, but I had a very good high school experience. I went to Auburn High School. I was the first class to go all 3 years at Auburn High School. It was a 3-year school then. I graduated in 1963. When they built Auburn High School, they took everybody from outside of the city proper and sent them to Auburn. And so there were kids from all over the surrounding areas of the city, and basically nobody knew anybody. There were no cliques formed or anything like that, so it was all new to everybody. And it was a good experience. I had a good time in high school. I wanted to be an auto mechanic, but my dad was an auto mechanic. He says, "You're not going to be an auto mechanic, you're going to go to college," because I was a car nut when I was in high school. And so I went to Southern Illinois University, and I majored in zoology. I wanted to be a wildlife biologist. And I actually, when I finished my graduate degree, or my bachelor's degree, I enrolled in grad school. And I was actually drafted out of grad school. I was working on my master's in zoology, and that was in 1968. I guess I've always been sort of naive about things, and it didn't really hit home to me until my best friend in college. We lived off campus because at the time that I went to Southern, it was they were going through growing spurts, and they didn't have enough on-campus housing. And I met this guy my first year there, and then we rented a room above a private home with another fellow. And one day, this friend of mine's name was Steve, and he said, if you were going to join the military, what would you join? And I, like a dummy, immediately said, I'd go into the Marines, because I was, brought up on Sands of Iwo Jima and John Wayne and all that, excuse my language, crap. And so we made a pact to join the Marine Corps together, and that was in 1966. So we went home for Thanksgiving, and when we came back, I knew he was in his room because I saw the light on. As I walked up, there was a stairway on the outside of the house to the sleeping quarters above. And I walked down the hallway, and I'll never forget this. He turned in his chair, and I knew right away what he had done. He had joined the Marine Corps without me, and I was so mad at him. I'm still mad at him to this day. But he went into the Marine Corps, and then he came back to see me in '66 in the summer, just before school let out. He came back to Carbondale. And then I got word from a friend of ours the day before my birthday in 1967, March the 2nd, that he had been killed in Vietnam. And that's when Vietnam really hit home to me, because it was something very personal. I went to his funeral. He was from Decatur, and I had known his family pretty well because I'd gone up to see them once with him prior to him enlisting in the Marine Corps. And so it made me a little wary of, not quite so gung-ho as I might have been before. And that's what the military looks for. They look for young people. As you get older, you start to think about, why are we doing this and why should we be doing this? But at least me, I was young and I was pretty malleable, so that was actually the first experience where it really hit home, other than what you would see on the nightly news, but that was all pretty far removed. So. I guess it was kind of a sense of relief. It was on Memorial Day. I was in Carbondale, and it was a Sunday, and my dad called me. And my dad was a man of few words. He was not somebody and he didn't like to talk on the telephone, so it was unusual to get a phone call from him. And my roommate had answered the phone, and we had been up quite late the night before doing things that college students do. And so he came back and he said, "Your dad's on the phone." And I walked down the hall where the phone was, and my dad said, "How's the weather down there?" And I knew right away, because he didn't care what the weather was like in Carbondale. And there was a long pause. I said, "It's fine." And there was a long pause, and then he said, "Well, it looks like Uncle Sam wants you." And I kind of figured it was going to happen because I had taken my physical for the draft April 22nd of '68, and I knew it was kind of only a matter of time. And it was kind of a relief, I guess. I was kind of burned out on college. I was tired of going to school. And with the draft looming over me, I thought, well, we'll get it done now. It'll be over. So it was a relief, I guess I could say.
Well, I can sit up there and move up. Move over.
These young Americans are sharing a great national experience. You will see them, hear them, and hear from them as they undergo this experience, as they meet the personal challenge presented to them. What they do, what they say, what they think, all this adds up to the story of Army basic training.
You will come up here to the end of the counter. You receive each bundle of clothes, Come up here and I will issue out 1 each raincoat to you. You move up there and I will issue out 1 each.
You're at the reception station. Your first clothing issue, the comfort issue, they call it. Enough to make you a soldier. Later, you'll get the full issue. Now the length of one small building, thin walls, a few moments of time separate you from outside. And the challenge awaiting you inside the Army.
When you go to basic training, and this was at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, you're in a, what they call a reception area, and there's a kind of a, I don't know, about 3 days or so of kind of orientation before you actually go to your basic training company. And it was kind of interesting because you're really in a melting pot. There's a lot of people from very different backgrounds than yours, but when we went to basic training, I remember we were loaded on, it was almost like a cattle car truck. And we arrived in this area and we got off the truck, and to greet us there was a very imposing, very large DI named Mr. Sanford Jones. He was a black gentleman. And he had a very colorful language, and he ran us down the hill. We were in Quonset huts at the top of this hill in one of the training areas at Fort Leonard Wood. And he had this huge swagger stick that was about this long, and if you didn't run fast enough or keep up with the group, he would swing the swagger stick at your heels and knock you off your feet. And we picked up bedding, and then he ran us back up the hill, the same thing. And so that was my first impression. And one of the things that I guess was, I was a little older when I was drafted. I was, in 1968, I was 23. And I kind of saw what the Army or the military tries to do when they send you through basic. And so I realized that, there's no sense fighting this because, it's going to happen. But there were some guys that did fight it, and it turned out not very good for them. So the best thing to do is to go with the flow. I thought, well, it can't be all that bad. Maybe a 90% chance or better of not winding up in actual combat. It was kind of a foregone conclusion, that I was going to have to go. We flew on commercial airlines. I flew on Continental Airlines to Hawaii, and then that's the only time I've been to Hawaii, and I didn't see anything because they wouldn't let you out of the airport. And then we had another stop. It was either the Philippines or Tokyo. I don't remember which one, because one of them was going over and one of them was coming back. And again, I can say I've been to those places, but I didn't see anything because they wouldn't let you out of the airport. It was very quiet, I remember that. And the thing that I do remember is when we arrived in Vietnam is when they opened the door. It was like 5 a.m. in the morning, and just the heat and the humidity, it was like a slap in the face. It was just unbelievable. I'll never forget that. When you stop and think about all the material possessions that you have and things that you might hold dear, and try to put all those in a simple backpack. And when you're in the jungle, we would be gone for 23 days, 30 days, and during that time you don't shower, you don't change your socks. And the fact that you don't even use water to brush your teeth, because water is a very precious commodity. Ammunition first, water, and then food. You're carrying an 80-pound pack, and it's not like walking on a flat surface on an open field. The jungle is just, it's unbelievable. It's dark. It smells like death. There's a lot of rotting vegetation. At night, some of the line companies would sleep on air mattresses, but when you move on an air mattress, it makes noises. It squeaks. So, in the Recon platoon, we didn't. I had a piece of plastic, just a clear plastic sheet that actually came from they were in the 105 round ammo crates, and it was I don't know, it was maybe 6 feet long and maybe 3 feet wide, and I would put that down at night and I would lay on that, and then a poncho liner, which is a quilted microfiber material, which was one of the few things that the Army had that was really, really, really good. Even when it was wet, it would keep you warm. I would put that over me. And the next morning when I would pick up that piece of plastic, there would be hundreds of these soldier termites with their little pincers dug into the plastic. The termites they're just a natural inhabitant of the jungle, and they would build these huge mounds. They would be bigger than that file cabinet, and maybe at least tall, and maybe 3 times of those. And they would be, the workers, I guess, they mix their saliva with the soil, and it turns out almost like concrete. And they were good cover, especially when you would, be in contact, and you could hide behind those. And sometimes we would find things hidden in them by the enemy. I remember we found some documents hidden in ammo boxes in one time. When I was with Delta Company, it was in my first firefight. We had crossed a blue line, a river, and the point man jumped to NVA and fired at them. Didn't get either one of them, but they dropped 50 caliber, US 50 caliber machine gun ammo, a couple of belts of it. And that was kind of prophetic for what was to come later. And I remember we moved up across that stream and moved up a hill, and we came to a flattened area. So I was new and I was naive, and I took my boots off. I'll never forget this. And about 2 o'clock in the morning, we started getting mortars. And we shouldn't have set up in an area that had already been occupied previously by somebody else, because areas generally like that, the NVA or the Viet Cong generally would have those plotted. And so they started dropping mortars on us, and they were bracketing us, where they would drop around here, and then they would drop around here, and then they would start to walk them closer and closer. And I didn't put my boots back on. I should have, but it quieted down, and then about an hour later, we got a ground attack. And they had a 51 caliber machine gun, which is the US 50 caliber machine gun, and there's a Chi-Com, or a Chinese 51 caliber machine gun. And the Chinese 51 caliber can fire 50 US 50 caliber ammunition. That's why those 2 NVA that they jumped at the blue line were carrying that ammunition. And I'll never forget the sound of that. It was just, because the 50 caliber has a kind of a slow rate of fire, and it's just going, and there's green tracers. The communist ammunition had green tracers, and ours had red tracers. And tracers they're a phosphorescent head that's on the round, and every 5th round, or every 5th cartridge of ammunition has that, and it's a way that you can track your fire. And these green tracers are crisscrossing the fob where we are, and branches are falling on me, and I'm wishing I'm in that hole, and I could hear these other guys over there in that hole, and I didn't dare move. And I'm trying to get as low as I can, and this thing is just going on and on and on, and there's M60 machine gun fires going on, and M16s and AK-47s, and you can always tell the AK-47s from the M16s. The AK-47s have a kind of a flat crack to them when the round goes off. And there's explosions, and there's guys screaming and yelling in Vietnamese, and I mean, it's just chaos, just utter confusion and chaos. And I was wishing I had my boots on, and I was wishing I was in that hole. And this went on until first light. And I mentioned this last night when I was with this group of friends. I have a special I have a special fondness in my heart for helicopter pilots because they saved my life for a number of occasions, but they put their lives on the line every day in Vietnam. And I'll never forget this. The guy's call sign was Chicken Man. Huey pilot came in with a load of ammo, and we're in this triple canopy jungle, and I mean, the trees there's 3 levels of vegetation. And he came down through the trees, and I'll swear there couldn't have been more than 6 feet on either side of the rotor blades. And I mean, one long, a gust of wind or something would have put him into the trees, and he would have been right in the middle of the perimeter we were. But he brought us a kick out of ammunition, which was distributed, and shortly after that, things broke off. And that was my first experience with combat, and it scared the living hell out of me. It was just like, it was nothing like anything I would ever have imagined. And I mean, I had watched, TV movies and movies in theaters and stuff like that, but it's nothing like that. It's indescribable. I can't tell you, what it was like. Anyway. The worst memory outside of that June 14th action was we were on a 7-man, maybe they called it a long-range reconnaissance patrol mission. And I actually volunteered for this one, and I didn't volunteer for a whole lot of things, but we were on a series of Razorbacks mountains, a chain. The base that we were on, LZ Dali on this Nuiong, was the northernmost mountain in the chain. And we had patrolled around these mountains to the south, and there was a trail that ran between 2 of these, and it was very heavily traveled. And so it was decided that they would send a observation team on this mission down there to monitor movement at night, particularly through this valley. And because at that time it was thought that they were worried about the Tet of '69 and troops moving out of Cambodia down around Saigon to stage another Tet offensive. And so if they saw anything moving through that valley that night, they were going to shoot artillery at it. When we first got there, the lieutenant had gone down and he set up a booby trap. It was a tripwire with a claymore mine, and I'm not sure exactly how he had it rigged, but it was on the eastern part of the trail. And the morning that we were going to leave, he went down to police that up with this friend of mine, Marty Howard. The other 5 of us were above on the ridge, getting ready to leave, and all of a sudden we heard this tremendous explosion. And so a couple of the guys started going down. I grabbed a radio and ran down after them. We left one guy with a radio up on the ridge. And we got down the hill, and Marty was carrying the lieutenant as best he could up towards our location. And the lieutenant had walked into the booby trap, but it had been moved. So there was probably a trail watcher that had seen us set it up. I don't know. Anyway, it had been moved, and he walked into it, and he got hurt really bad. I mean, he was really wounded badly. And so we carried him back up to where we had set up. I call for a medevac bird, and the lieutenant's lying right beside me, and he's really hurt bad. And this is one thing that makes me extremely angry. I'm still angry about it today. I believe it was the battalion XO, which was a major, the executive officer. He got on the radio and he said, "I need a status report on," he gave the call sign of Echo Company, a Recon platoon their call sign was Big Sioux. And this would have been Big Sioux 5 because he was a lieutenant of the Recon platoon. He said, "I need a status report on Big Sioux 5. And so I told him, I said, "Well, he's been wounded." And he said, "Well, how badly hurt is he?" And I said, "I can't tell you that because he's lying right here beside me. If I tell you how badly hurt he is, he can go in shock and he could die." And we didn't have a medic with us. And he's got, Claymore mines have like 700 ball bearings embedded in what's called C4 plastic, which is a very high explosive. And he's got the backs of his legs, his buttocks are all just shredded. And so anyway, he kept pressing me to tell him how, what his status was, and I just kind of blew him off on the radio. I thought, well, I can't tell you. And so we got the medevac bird came in, we got him loaded on and flew him back in, and I thought, well, so then we called for an evacuation by helicopter. Well, they denied our evacuation by helicopter and made us walk back in. And I thought, oh crap, there's 6 of us here. And we're leaderless, so to speak, and now we got to walk back in. Anyway, we walked back in. When we got back to the LZ, came through the wire, and that major was waiting for me, and he basically chewed me a new asshole. I'm sorry. I called you. I had one status report from me, and you wouldn't give me one. I said, I can't. And I explained to him. I said, if I would have told you how badly hurt he was, he could have died. He could have gone in shock. And we didn't have a medic. But he wasn't hearing any of that, so. The last days, I think, were probably the ones that were the most suspenseful, I guess, or because you're hoping that nothing happens. Fortunately, I was in a pretty secure area. We were back at an LZ called LZ Mary, and not much had taken place in that area. In fact, we hadn't really had much of anything going on, and I remember I caught the first thing smoking that morning out of the LZ, and that meant flying out of the LZ, and it was a 2-seater light observation helicopter. And I'll never forget, I don't know whether the pilot was trying to scare me or just showing off or what, but we flew down this road and we were flying, I don't know, we couldn't have been more than 20, 30 feet off the ground. And I'm thinking, oh great, my last day in Vietnam, we're gonna get shot down and I'm gonna get killed. But it didn't, and I got back. I can't remember where I flew back to. It might have been LZ Buttons, which was a larger base camp, and then I caught something going out of there. And eventually I found my way back down to Long Bend to the 259th replacement unit and to go back home. And there was a fellow that was sitting next to me, a businessman. I was even a suit and tie, but he said to me, "Just coming back from Vietnam?" And I said, "Yeah." And that was the extent of the conversation that I had with anybody or anything. And it was quite a change. It was a shock because I went from, Vietnam to Chicago in the 27th of January in a matter of about 48 hours. So it was not, and when I went back to graduate school, and there were a lot of veterans that were coming back that time. They were going back to school, and it was really kind of they were kind of shunned. I mean, people, basically, most of them were older than regular college students, and they didn't have a lot in common. And I'll never forget, I had a professor. We had one guy, and it was a it was a plant physiology course, and there was a 4-hour lab, and I don't know, that met a couple times a week, and then lecture. And the professor he was never there. It was always grad students that taught the thing. And this one guy he was having a lot of problems readjusting to civilian life and coming back to school. And I'll never forget this. This professor stuck his head in the door once during this 4-hour lab on the morning, and he said, "Where's so-and-so?" He said, "Is he gone again? Man, he needs to get it together." And I thought, you know, that's simple for you to say, but you have no idea what this guy went through. And, you know, so I don't know. It was just, I think it was different how we were perceived by other people. And some guys adjusted better than others. I was fortunate. I mean, it had took a while. I know I had a lot of anger when I came back. And some of that anger probably contributed to the dissolvement of my first marriage. But I came to grips with that after a while because I think it's from I think it's from some song from the 60s. I can't walk roads of anger, I ain't got the time. I don't know what the line is from, but it's just something that's always stuck with me. So I decided, you know, you can be angry about something your entire life and let it drag you down, or you can be positive and upbeat about something and get on with things. And that's kind of what I've tried to do. Not that decorations and medals are a big thing. I never saw anybody do anything over there with the idea that they were going to get a medal. I saw some extremely courageous and some really brave things that were done, and some very, what would be, I'm sure the guys later said, why the hell did I do that, you know, things, but they didn't do it because they were doing it to get a medal. They were doing it to save somebody else's life. And most of the time, they didn't get anything, but I'm saying they didn't, you know, do that for a medal. So, but anyway, it's something I'm really proud of. So. This was about maybe 15 years ago. And as I started to read through them, the first letters were kind of upbeat, you know, this isn't so bad, you know, I'll get acclimated. And then as we went on, they got darker and darker. And I was more disillusioned with